Well, this is something very special for me. I'm here at Government House today to be able to talk to Governor Kenneth Mapp. He's a good friend. I've interviewed him many, many other times at a lot of different places, at the Lieutenant Governor's office, licensing and consumer affairs, and just, well, any place you can think of. And when he was running for Lieutenant Governor was Roy Snyder. But today I get a chance to do a one-on-one, as the saying goes, here at the office. And Governor, good to see you.
Lee, good morning. It's
Good morning.
wonderful to see you as well,
Yeah.
and I'm
happy,
glad to welcome you to Government House, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to
You're
you.
looking good, man.
Well, I try to stay with it, but 85 is a lot of years. Right?
When you said that you were 85, I was really surprised. You don't look like you're 85, and I know we go back quite a distance over time, and your view of history in the Virgin Islands trumps many. I don't know. There are just very few people that I think could stand with you in terms of the history of this territory and the things that you've witnessed. So I want to thank you for being just a powerful and wonderful Virgin Islander who's been here and been through the ups and the downs and shepherded the news through and the
elections.
And many of the elections. And let me just tell you a story, if I may. Yeah. I remember you with Chief Canton when they had the fire of the
Angelina
Laura. And Chief Canton had some barrier of where folks could go because of the fire, and you and him got into a good discussion about the First Amendment and the freedom of the press and all of that good stuff. So
May I just jump on top of that?
Sure.
And tell you what happened, actually happened, right? They surrounded me and blew their horns and everything because someone had gone to Chief Canton and said, Lee Carle says you've got to move your thing. Actually, their police car with the lights on, with the transistors, was interfering with the broadcast. So I'd asked the guy if he'd please move it, and he went to Canton and said, Lee Carle, so I kind of belligerent kind of thing, And so when they disconnected me, because they did, Governor Juan Louis called me and said, Lee, are you all right? And I said, fine. He said, what do you want me to do? I said, get me back on the air. That's all. And as a professional, I didn't go anything about what they did to me. I went right on the air, you know?
Yes.
And that was part of the story. After that, Dave Canton and I are the best of friends.
Down
through the years.
Yes.
Right,
he was a wonderful gentleman as well.
Wonderful person.
But I just could not sit and do this interview with you and not recognize your history in this territory and the iconic Virgin Islander that you are and all that you've done in the Virgin Islands. And, a number of people don't even know that you brought up a few folks that are on the radio now. They've come up through your tutelage.
That's it. Addie.
Yes.
Lee Vanderpool.
Yes.
John Griot.
Yes.
Judy Schimmel. All of those people. Because that was my thing. I predicted that one day Addie would own a radio station, right? Because I trained him both here and in the States.
Wow.
And I always had a cadre of young people for the breakdancing, for the singing groups, right? We had 16 singing groups at one time. I took a show over to St. Croix with Doc James, and well, it goes on and on, wonderful stories. And that other story about whatever happened, why Melvin Evans was the first elected governor. And
you know that deal.
There's a room 107 at Carle Beach.
Yes.
And that's a story to be told someday.
Yes, that's right.
But I'm here to talk to Governor Kenneth Mapp. Governor, most people are saying, some people are saying, very good, it's great, wonderful, Hovensa, the sale, we'll get back to work again. Okay. You've talked about it at quite length already. So I guess what I want to say is I sit with you right here, and it's days after you've said something already. Where are we?
Well, today is January the 4th, and I flew into St. Thomas this morning, and prior to doing that, part of my early morning chores were to sign off all of the final closing documents. We're closing the transaction today, so the government will receive its cash payment. We're receiving the keys and the codes and the security codes for those provisions of the properties that the people of the Virgin Islands are receiving. The deeds are being filed today. And so literally this is the day that the transaction takes place and a change of ownership. Lime Tree Bay Terminals will be in possession, and the new owners of the terminal and storage facility. The people of the Virgin Islands will be in possession or receive in its land bank another 550 acres of land, 122 houses, homes, a vocational technical school, and the set-asides. There will be the Hess Oil has signed to remove or have dismissed its tax claims against the government of the Virgin Islands, and PDVSA has already signed and submitted their documents for the withdrawal of their tax claims from against the government of the Virgin Islands. So that's a $368 million claim that will no longer be pending against the people of the Virgin Islands, and shortly thereafter we will withdraw our civil suit against Hess Oil for the $1.5 billion that we had filed earlier this year. So all of those, the formalities and the wire transfers and the monies and the deeds and the ownership and the control of all of the issues happening on the south shore of St. Croix is now taking place today, and by the end of business, there'll be new owners. The signs, people will see in the next number of days, the Hovensa signs will be removed, and Lime Tree Bay will append its signage, as it sees appropriate. And you will soon see at the vocational school, it will be, you will see the seal of the government of the Virgin Islands and the sign of the government of the Virgin Islands on the building, because that will be your property. So, we're happy that we've gone through that. I really want to be clear that while the Lime Tree Bay and the ArcLight transaction is very, very important to this territory and to resolve the issues with Hess and PDVSA, and to put that chapter to rest, and very important part of our history, my administration will not be marked as that will be our signature. We have a really powerful vision for improving the quality of life and the conditions under which we live, and growing and expanding the economy of the Virgin Islands. And I'm so excited to be a part of that and to lead that effort. This is a new year, so let me say Happy New Year to the people of the Virgin Islands, and I look forward on January 25th in the State of the Territory message to be able to articulate what some additional issues on that vision is, and based on how we had inherited the government. So I'm excited. I'm very optimistic.
Sounds very, very good. Brings to question a thought, a very quick thought. I was with you down at Frenchtown when you were in charge of, I believe, with Governor Evans signing bonds and that.
You mean Governor Turnbull?
Governor Turnbull, I'm sorry.
Public Finance Authority.
Yes, Public
Yes.
Finance Authority, right. And I was amazed at how you handled that. And so my question is, where do we stand with Standard & Poor's?
Well, all of our bond transactions of the government of the Virgin Islands are actually investment grade rated. They're triple B, and I believe triple B plus, if I'm not mistaken. But I know that they are investment grade rating. We have room for improvement, but let's say what that means. Ratings are clearly connected to the cost of money, and so we have, in the administration, the government that I inherited, have seen transactions with borrowing at 5%. We've seen some at 6%. We just closed a $100 million Gavi bond transaction. This has to do with road projects on December the 12th.
I remember that, yes.
And the interest rate of that money is 3.54%. And so that's the best way to talk about investment grade rating, or what your rating of your transactions are. And what that means is that there's $90+ million in the bank right now in the treasury of the government of the Virgin Islands. $40 million will start the next phase of the Veterans Drive project on St. Thomas. We're going to spend about $4 million on roads on the island of St. John, and $51 million for road construction on the island of St. Croix. And that cash is now in the bank.
Having been said that, you, in the earlies, you said, look, we're going to get this money, $220 million, right? 20 million of it. And you said, but that does not take us out of the hole.
Oh, no.
Right?
No.
Explain that.
What that cash infusion will do is it will allow us not to need to borrow any money for working capital over the next 3 fiscal years. If we are smart in what we do, we will use that opportunity of not having to, and when I say borrowing, I want to be clear, borrowing for operating expenses, because we're going to be going to the capital market for money for infrastructure improvement, schools and
Right.
other
Yes.
accoutrements for the economic growth of the territory. But we've been borrowing money almost every year for the standard working expenses, daily expenses of the government of the Virgin Islands. This cash infusion will give us the opportunity that we will not have to do that over the next 3 fiscal years if we are prudent. It will allow us to meet our obligations for tax refunds. It will allow us to bring some of our obligations to government workers up to date. It will allow us to liquidate our line of credits that we have outstanding, going up to $60 million that we use for day-to-day expenses of the government of the Virgin Islands. And so last week I sent a directive to the Commissioner of Finance that we had about $21 million left, I believe, for the 2014, that were ready to go, I should say, for the 2014 tax refunds, which is the current tax year, and I directed him to release that. I will sign a directive today to the Office of Management and Budget to Director Barry. We had about an 8% budget cut, allotment cut to each of the department and agencies of the executive branch, because the courts don't get allotment cuts, nor does the legislature get allotment cuts. We have to eat all of the shortages in the executive branch. So I'm directing the budget director to restore all of those allotments to the full levels. We are currently on the budget of the Mapp Potter administration, which began October 1 of 2015. So we will have our fully funded 874 vacant positions of the government of the Virgin Islands. So we'll be recruiting quite a bit of folks this year. The Division of Personnel will be launching, or have begun to launch, the ad campaign advertising these positions, their salaries, and where people can go to apply for them. So this gives us an opportunity to get more of our house in order and to begin to plan towards a sound financial system. Director Barry and the financial team have been speaking about this in terms to the legislature, how we're going to get to a permanent, strong foundation on our financial condition, but it also allows us to invest in the infrastructure of the economy, of the private sector, of our responsibility of government to grow the private sector. And the Hovensa transaction, or the ArcLight transaction, is not hardly going to be the only business transaction. The legislature is going to probably get 3 more just in 2016, having to do with major investments by the private sector and the government of the Virgin Islands to move the economy forward.
Well, it sounds very optimistic,
Yes.
very good. But I guess the question to ask, apart from all of the very complicated things you're talking about, where are you living these days?
Well, I live in my home on St. Croix for all intents and purposes. I do have the residence at Government House in St. Croix available to me, and I think maybe for the year I may have stayed there 5 nights, and predominantly around our emergency for the hurricane season. In St. Thomas, I'm still in a hotel. When I'm required to be on St. Thomas in the evenings, I do stay in a hotel, and I understand the legislature has passed a bill that is seeking to set aside some permanent residence for the governor of the Virgin Islands, and we'll look at that and decide if that will work. I still am a little concerned, and maybe I'm going to have to talk to my friends at the West Indian Company, because we can't let Katrinberg just fall apart. It may make a wonderful museum.
It's a beautiful old home.
Yes,
I've been there many times.
And it may work out to be a night or two accommodation if we have members of Congress that come on official business, or ahead of one of the federal departments and agencies. We might be able to, because you can't live there on any permanent basis, but we can have the place restored enough that we could use it as guest quarters for federal officials that come to the territory, and use that as part of our schmoozing for additional resources and support.
I wanted to get your thinking on how many times I've turned the radio on and I hear somebody on a talk show generally the person talking has no idea of what really is going on, but they're talking, and they're generally very critical of what you're doing. And just give me a feel for that as you.
Well, you know, Lee, my history is marred in controversy. If you go to just about any job I've had, and let's just take the administrative jobs, the consumer services, lieutenant governor, the public finance authority,
Senatorial.
well, the Senate, yes, I've had a bang-up bit of controversy,
Yes, sir.
but I think by the time I'm finished my tenure, I think people look back and find a great deal of satisfaction in my ability to deliver the work to the people of the territory. My style and my attitude is one of focusing on the work. I take the criticism, I listen. If the criticism is constructive, I learn from it. If it isn't, I just keep moving. I'm not bogged down by it. And I've been on this public stage, not as one as grand as that of governor, but I've been on this public stage for 33 years, so I've got a thick skin about it. And I think as we move on, people are going to see that we are focused, that we have an agenda for the people of the Virgin Islands, that we're going to work that agenda. I think the day of anything goes, and anybody can do and should do whatever they want, and we'll find a way to make it work. That doesn't work with me. We have laws. We should have a standard of performance. We should have accountability, a day and deadlines by which things should be done. And I've carried myself that way my entire career, and I think I have the people of the Virgin Islands have been really very good to me, and I'm honored to serve them. I have a wonderful portfolio and history of accomplishments in all of the areas that I have worked for the people of the Virgin Islands, and I'm not going to have any less result in this office called the Office of Governor.
I was saying to myself, I really ought to ask the governor, because you've been in New York, you've been in politics how many years now?
Well, 33, 34.
30, okay, 3. Okay, so as we look at the national scene, and someone said, well, this is the Virgin Islands. I said, no, but the Virgin Islands is very reflective of what's happening in the States, Republican, Democrat,
Yes.
ICM, whatever, right? So I want to get your feeling right now as we look at the national scene, the Trump situation, Hillary, now that the husband has joined. Anyway, just a thinking how the governor of the Virgin Islands now thinks about what's happening up there.
Well, it's an interesting insight for me. I'm an independent governor, and I go to the National Governors Association, and I go as an independent, and I walk the halls of Congress and the U.S. Senate and House, and I meet members on both sides of the party and the leaderships, and I go as an independent, and I speak on the interest of the territory. I think there's tremendous polarization in Washington. I think we are, as a nation, we are consumed with political affiliation, and some of that breeds itself into the Virgin Islands. I and Mr. Potter have been very successful in building and creating a coalition, something exactly that Governor Schneider and I did back in 1994, and we are committed, Lieutenant Governor Potter and I are committed to working on those issues that are really important to the people of the Virgin Islands, and to work with Democrats and Republicans and ICMers and other independents, and try to articulate sort of a position that is for this territory. Now, we have to set the example, and we're hopeful that we're going to be able to pull some folks up to that standard. I heard a member of the legislature after the vote on the ArcLight deal speak about, and that cast a no vote, and spoke about some personal issue with her family member and I that is giving her difficulty on focusing on those issues that are important to the territory. She's focused apparently on me, and that's a squandering of an opportunity to represent the territory, because I personally don't know what issue that she could be referring to, but to stand on the floor of the legislature on the day of such an important vote and articulate, or to say to the people of the Virgin Islands that there are personal issues between the two of us, that is just being irresponsible, because the lives of the people of the territory matter. I've got 33 very good years on the public stage. I have been very successful in the private sector. I have what I believe a very distinguished career. When I'm finished my tenure at Government House, I will be in the Virgin Islands, and I expect to possibly teach a course or two at the University of the Virgin Islands, write a book, but I'm not going to be running for anything. I'm not going to be, I have no more career to make. And I'm not going to be kicked off the public stage because I've stayed on too long. And so I'm just asking my friends from all sides of the political aisles to let's try to focus more on what's important to the people of the Virgin Islands and not be jaded by what we believe are our personal importance, because at the end of the day, none of us that are elected have any personal importance.
Now, I would not be a reporter if I didn't remember that you said State of the Territory address. When is that again?
January 25th.
January 25th.
Yes.
And thinking of that, I said to myself, well, there's got to be something he's going to say there that we don't know anything about. So is there something that you could tell us just a little bit about what is something you didn't touch on before?
Oh, no, I don't know that I have any secrets I wish to reveal today. I think we want to talk more about a focus on the interests of the territory. There will be those, we don't expect everyone to support what we do. We don't expect everyone to see the same common denominators. And the political debate is very, very healthy. And when folks articulate their positions on issues, we respect that. And so to the extent that we can harness the greater number of the people in the community and the greater number of people in the political arena to look towards a brighter and a better Virgin Islands, recognizing that it really requires hard work and some level of sacrifice, then the territory is going to really do well.
Well, I think, Governor, the naysayers have a really difficult time of it these days with all your optimism and all of the things that you're saying. And so as I look and step back and knowing you down through the years, not afraid to make a decision about something. No. And,
not at all.
And when you were at Licensing Consumer Affairs, I remember the Pueblo incident.
Yes.
Right? But so,
I mean,
how many days of your administration are we talking about right now?
Well, tomorrow, which will be January 5th, will make the first anniversary. We would have been in office 1 year, and we're going to talk with great specificity of what we accepted and received in this first year as an inheritance from the previous administration, not appending any blame, but what the condition we inherited and what we've been able to do. I mean, where people wouldn't see this, we have restored our relationship with our federal partners to such an extent that old federal dollars that were withdrawn from the territory are being restored. Areas where we used general fund monies, and I'm talking millions of dollars, to pay for federal programs, we've had our federal agencies refund the government of the Virgin Islands. We commend the leadership of the Virgin Islands Police Department that have gone into the district court under the consent decree, and in 6 years or 5 years, for the first time, received such accolades from the district court judge on how much progress we have made in a year. On January 14th, my police commissioner and my support team for the law enforcement community will be in front of Senator Noble Francis's committee talking about the assessment that was done on the Virgin Islands Police Department and the law enforcement community of the Virgin Islands, recognizing our weaknesses, recognizing our where we're falling short on resources and support for our police officers, where we have really failed on appropriate promotional structures, where we have a lack of technology, but we'll be able to compare that in terms of what we've done, and that we've even received the approval of Commissioner William Bratton, starting January 2016, to send our youngest police officers to train in the New York City Police Academy.
Isn't this interesting that you're doing this, excuse me, because that's what you started out being.
That's where I graduated from, the New York City Police Academy. I have an affinity for NYPD, but NYPD has a history, a undisputed history of tremendous development in law enforcement and in reducing crime. I worked in New York City in the 83rd Precinct, where crime was really, really bad.
What precinct was that?
The 83rd Precinct
Yes.
on Wilson Avenue in Brooklyn, where crime was horrible, and where New York is today, even in the violent crime across the nation, you don't see that happening in the city of New York. And so the ability to have NYPD serve as the mentor agency for the VIPD and the law enforcement community is going to be a tremendous advance in training, in resources, in the use of technology, in the ability to raise policing in the U.S. Virgin Islands to a significant professional level. See, there was a time in policing where we judged the success of a police department based on how many cases you solve. Today, in today's world, we don't judge your success on how many cases you solve. We judge your success on how many crimes you prevent and how you can have the intelligence gathering, how you can intervene and save lives and prevent people from being victimized, and how you can tie into so many of the video surveillance systems that are in the private sector and on homes, and have the VIPD have access to have a command center that provides this kind of resource to the department. If I could just tell you this story, we were at the Festival Village, and again, I have to thank the Commissioner Richards and the law enforcement community, not just the VIPD, for a tremendously safe festival season where thousands of people came out and were in the village and were on the roads of St. Croix throughout the season, and Juve, and pretty much incident-free. But the first night when we opened the village, I saw this trailer, and it was in the colors of the Virgin Islands Police Department, and it said VIPD Command Center. So, you know, coming from policing, I said, well, let me go in and see what it looked like. And I stepped up, they opened the door, and I stepped up, it was air conditioned, and they had a 19-inch computer monitor on a table and nothing else. And they had a room that appeared to be the bathroom, and I opened the door, and there was a sink and a toilet paper hold on the wall, but no commode. They had a piece of plywood over the pipe where the commode sat. And I said, what is this? And they said, well, this is the condition of the command center, but we're using it. The VIPD, Commissioner Richards, installed $38,000 worth of surveillance cameras in the village, and that unit was supposed to house the recording systems and the monitors for the police department. And I said, this is not going to work. And so I got with the police commissioner, and they'll be off this week, going to have a complete command centers, fully retrofitted with the technology and the systems that are required for St. Croix and for St. Thomas and St. John, so that when we have activities or we have large crowds, or if we have incidences, that the police department and its officers can properly mobilize to do the task that we've asked them to do. And you know, I talked about the consent decree. We can see our way out of it in VIPD. The district court commended Mr. Mulgrath from the Bureau of Corrections on the advances that are being made at the Bureau of Corrections. We're transferring prisoners to the U.S. mainland. We can actually house prisoners in the U.S. mainland for 50% less than the money that we're paying in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Plus, we can include their medical health coverages while they're on the mainland, while we repair the infrastructure for our correction systems. We have tremendous vacancies of correction officers, so it gives us an opportunity to recruit and to train and to professionalize the correction science. We're sending correction officers to the police department. That doesn't work. Police science and correction science are two different sciences. And if you train someone as a police officer and put them in a prison, within 2 years, you're going to lose them. Because they can't, that's like training me to be a florist and then taking me up to the operating room at the Schneider Hospital and telling me, here's your patient. There's a heart problem here, solve the problem. It just doesn't work. So we're really, really excited by so much of the things that we're getting ready to do. I'll give you an insight. Trash and garbage and refuge around the territory.
That was one of my questions.
We're going to send a major bill to the legislature on how we're going to move to recycling. We're not going to do waste to energy. We're not going to waste people's money and time trying to do waste to energy programs because we don't produce enough garbage in the Virgin Islands on a daily basis to adequately support a waste to energy plant. So we're going to do recycling, we're going to do exporting, we're going to restrict plastic bags, we're going to work on how we're going to help people understand that when you throw trash out of your vehicle, you're trashing your home. You know, tourists don't come here and dirty the Virgin Islands. When we drive around the streets of the territory, we're the ones that are trashing our own home, and we have to really put a support system in place to help to educate folks that that is just simply unacceptable, and to be able to enforce the little laws to ensure that those who ignore them have to account for them. There will be change in the leadership at the Waste Management Authority, and that's important to move forward in the next paradigm. I've been putting new members on the board of directors there so that they can take up the Waste Management Authority, and let's move it to a modern operation. It's a $31 million a year budget operation, and we just cannot continue doing what we're doing there now.
Governor, there's so many other questions, but are short on time. I wanted to, just before we go, education, very quickly.
Yes, I received my briefing from the Department of Education, and I tell this story because I think it's important. In 2007, I served on a panel talking about the lack of achievement in public education in the Virgin Islands. And in 2007, the U.S. Department of Education had set a goal for the purposes of retaining all of our federal education dollars, that 20% of third graders in 2008 needed to be reading on the third grade level. Now that's 1 in 5. So that means that in 2007, we had less than 1 in 5 third graders reading on the third grade level. Now if we use our current budget, and it was higher in 2007, but let's just use the current budget of the Department of Education of about $153 million of local money. That does not include federal money. And we count the 8 years from 2007 to 2016, that means we would have spent $1.2 billion in public education in the U.S. Virgin Islands in the last 8 years. In my briefing by the Department of Education for the last school year, 12% of third graders are reading on the third grade level. So that means now it's about 1 in 10. It was less than 1 in 5, now it's about 1 in 10. Why is this important? We don't say this a lot in governance. This is something we learn in public administration. But the reason, one of the critical reasons why we teach and test third graders to determine their proficiency, because from their test scores in the third grade, we know how many prisons we're going to need 10 years later. We know that 60%, more than 60% of African American and Latino males that do not graduate from high school will see prison before the age of 30. And so when we see the violent crime and the crime that is going on in the Virgin Islands, and we correlate back to an education system where about 1 in 10 third graders are reading on the third grade level, we must understand that we're only going to have more crime and more violence as the future goes forward. And so Dr. McCollum is leading our charge in changing this paradigm in public education. We have to look at what we're doing in the Head Start programs. We have to change how we're dealing with pre-kindergarten and kindergarten, first and second grade, to ensure that at the third grade level, the children are performing at that standard. And on the positive note, the children that do perform, particularly African Americans and Latinos, that do perform at the third grade level in third grade, they become our superstars in education, in achievement. They go to college, they come out, they become the professionals, they become professional athletes, business folks, science, medicine, technology. And so in our community, where we have a majority of African Americans and Latino persons or population, these numbers are very critical in what we're doing. And there's no way that I could preside over a government and next year and the year after and the year after come to the people of the Virgin Islands and talk about the low performance in public education. Yes, we have to pay teachers better. Yes, we have to prepare and create better schools. Yes, we must get parents involved in the education of their children. Yes, we have to start teaching the whole child. We've given up on music. We've given up on arts. We've given up on drama. We've given up on poetry to save money. But when we do that, that means we're not teaching and raising the entire person. We're only focusing on the academics. We have to change that paradigm. And so we've been able to put money in our current budget to be able to infuse dollars into these programs to give our children an opportunity to become who they are and to be able to grow the potential and the talent that they have and to be proud of it. So again, I may sound optimistic. It is because I am, because these shortcomings actually are nothing more than opportunities. And how we seize upon the opportunities and not try to go from 12% reading on the third grade level to 80%. But how do we get to 24? How do we get to 36? How do we get to 48? How do we get to 60? And if we make these incremental achievements, then we're going to be making progress.
Governor, my head is spinning.
I'm sorry.
No, on the things you've been talking about, but I know we're out of time, but I want to thank you very much for me allowing to do this, because I had a thing I wanted to say to you that many times, let me use the term, you're very academic at times, right? And tend to have the figures there out, and people are saying, wait a minute, wait, just a minute,
yes.
right? But
the numbers are important because they're not just numbers.
Yes, I know.
They're measurements.
Yeah.
If you're making, I don't know if I should use this example in St. Thomas, but if you're making Vienna cake, right? You
Yes.
have to know how much flour to sugar to butter you need.
Yes.
And if you have the number off, you're going to be making
That's
something
right.
else,
That's true.
right?
That's true.
So in the management of our community, the data really does matter. And if you get the public to see those numbers and understand what they mean, when you say to someone that you can count how many prison cells you need 10 years from third grade, that's a profound bit of science. Profound. I mean, you take, I don't want to stay in the numbers, but you take the mass shootings that's going off across the nation. The public will learn, and we've learned this from the CDC, that the common denominator of all of the perpetrators in every major mass shooting in our recent time, that person has been a serious victim of physical or sexual abuse as a child. So that once you've been able to make that as the link from people all across America, from different backgrounds, from different families, from different income levels, that is the link. Then the question is, how then do you identify children who are victims of those two salient, horrible crimes and intervene and provide them help and then provide a system of deterrence? And that's the way we work in the public administrative of scope. So the data, the numbers, while I'm not rattling them off because I think it makes me, it impresses anyone, I'm rattling them off because it's important for us as a community that when we read these numbers in the paper, we don't just say, my goodness, they're not doing a good job in public education. It's not that we're not doing a good job in public education, but we're growing criminals. That's the other side of the quarter. And so if we want to reduce the number of criminals we're growing, that means that what do we have to do? We have to change the paradigm to ensure that more children are successful, that more children are getting it, that those systems that we need in school and in teachers and the conditions of the classrooms, and that the most profound parental involvement in a child's education is what makes the difference in a society. And that's the only reason.
Well, Governor, it's been really great.
Thank
here.
you.
Really
it's been wonderful. And you look good.
Yes, thank
you got to
you,
keep
thank
on taking care of yourself.
Yes.
I think you have a new mate and you hiding and you ain't telling us the truth, you know, but we're going to leave that because you're bright. You have a glow about you.
Really?
You know, and that means the person that's going to sleep happy.
Yes.
You know, so.
Well, I've tried my best to take a page from your book.
From my book.
Optimism.
Yes.
Optimism.
All right.
So
I want to thank you, Lee. It's really wonderful. And again, I really want to commend you because, again, for me, you're just one of those powerful Virgin Islanders that, and you must have such a catalog of history. And you know, in this age of technology and the digital age, you know, I'm hopeful that if we can have the opportunity to maybe get copies and be able to have that stuff reposed, copies of it being reposed at the Turnbull Library, there are just so many generations that can come behind and learn. You know, I go to schools and I say, do you know who Melvin Evans was? And some of the students look at
Some
me.
people don't know.
Do you know who Cyril King was? And
Cyril
they
and
don't
I
know.
were very good friends
Yes,
too. Yeah.
yes. So
He loved horse racing.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
So if we can do that. So I want to thank you. I've enjoyed the time speaking with you, and I hope we could do it again soon.
I'd like to do that.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of stuff to talk about but you brought out you doubled on something, exactly what I was going to ask the next question. So
Yes.
it's perfect. But I want to congratulate you so far on what you've done, the optimism you have, and the naysayers can sit back and wonder what's going on, right?
They'll just see the work happen,
Yes.
and then they'll have to sort of naysay, and they're good. They're productive naysayers.
Right.
Let me be clear. They are productive.
Thank you again.
Naysayers and
Wonderful.
really good critics. Thank you so much, Lee.
Thank you.
And you have a wonderful and a very, very good 2016.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.